state legislative session, and some of the most controversial bills are coming in for a landing, fueled by the Republican supermajority, signed or about to be by the governor, and not without hours of debates and some serious protest. We continue to host as many South Florida lawmakers as we can to talk about their positions and their votes for you. And with us today, two South Florida state reps from either side of the aisle who also represent some of the Broward cities struggling with flooding right now. Chip LaMarca, Republican representing coastal Broward from Fort Lauderdale to Lighthouse Point. Hillary Cassel is serving her first term, a Democrat repping Dania Beach, Hollywood, and Hallandale Beach. And it is really good to see you both today. Thanks so much for being here.
Glad to be here.
So we'll get to bills.
Nice to be here. Thanks for having us.
Of course. We're going to get to the bills in just a minute. I want to sort of just stay with this kind of weather phenomenon that both of you have constituents suffering at the moment. Chip LaMarca, let me start with you. You were both in Tallahassee when this happened this week. Take us through how this news of this unfolding calamity bubbled up to the state legislature. How did you hear this?
Well, Wednesday evening, I was coming back, leaving the Capitol, and got a phone call from some folks in Fort Lauderdale. I spoke to Greg Chevarria, the city manager in Fort Lauderdale, who he and I have been in contact every day since this happened, as well as the District 4 Commissioner Warren Sturman, who's down in the south part of the city where all the flooding really was. And we work directly with the state, with Kevin Guthrie at Division of Emergency Management, which we want to thank him first for his amazing work through COVID and then hurricanes, and now we have these weather events like this, and it's really about connecting resources. And the city has been in contact with us and asking for what they need. And I know that the county had an issue with the emergency order, but ultimately got that worked out. And the Mayor Lamar Fisher and Mayor Dean Trantelis have been in contact with the state, and the resources are flowing now.
And I know even as we speak, we mentioned that the Division of Emergency Management Director Kevin Guthrie and a lot of other people are about to have a press conference to update everybody on the ground here in real time. Hillary Cassel, you represent Dania Beach, where there was actually one of two tornadoes touch down, and we saw some of your constituents dealing with just kind of that narrow spot damage. Tomorrow, you are on the Infrastructure Committee, which meets tomorrow, but none of the bills you'll be talking about tomorrow have anything to do with this. What do you forecast a little bit for me? Is this going to be the sort of spark for some legislation to come?
It's not only should be the spark, it should be the grenade that lets us know that we're in trouble. As you know, I'm a property insurance expert. That's my area of specialty. Yep. So really communicating with residents and letting all Floridians know that flood is really the next, portion of the climate control crisis that we really need to deal with, and really educate residents that we need coverage, and we need to make sure that people have coverage and have the ability to rebuild after things like this, because it's not a matter of if, as we've seen this week, it's a matter of when. I personally can't get half of the street to get out of my own neighborhood. There are cars still stuck in major floods. My district aide's home was flooded and was unable to get access to our office on Friday. So this hits really close to home. And obviously the legislature isn't likely going to rebound with bills on Monday, but I anticipate speaking with the chair of that larger infrastructure, Chair Payne, to figuring out, do we need to call a special session? Do we need to try to advocate for some additional resources in the budget as we prepare to engage in appropriations communications and conferencing this week to get some assistance to my community? So that will be a top priority for me.
You brought up a really good topic, flood insurance, which is offered at a much lower rate to homeowners than the property insurance on the private market or even citizens, because flood insurance is a national pool, but it's not required for everyone. And you both represent such coastal cities. I know, Chip LaMarca, you have a lot of constituents who are required to have flood insurance if they have a mortgage, but have you sort of gauged how many people are dealing with floods and the aftermath of flood damage that are not insured for that?
Yeah, it's a great question, Glenna. I'd give you an example. When the last flood maps came out, I am right at the mouth of the Hillsborough Inlet and Lighthouse Point on a dry lot side of the street, and I actually am not required to have flood insurance for my mortgage, but we keep it. It's the cheapest insurance you can buy for the most bang for your buck if God forbid anything happens like this. And it's something that we really need to look at. I mean, going back to 2007, 2008, we talked about a national catastrophic fund and what is going on wrong with the flood process in DC. But at that point, the northeastern states were saying, "Hey, well, you have all the hurricanes down there in the mid 2000s. We don't want to pay for your damage." And then they had Sandy. Every other state has some type of calamity that hits them from a natural disaster perspective, and I just think it's something we should look at as a federal model. I mean, obviously, we've got to figure out what the affordability number is, but ultimately, we can't have people that are unprotected, and we got to make sure that that we have a product that they can purchase. That God forbid something like this happens, that they'll get relief.
Yeah, I actually remember reading about some of that when the state was considering that pool. And I remember there are 5 states, and I don't remember which ones. 5 states are the only states that don't have some kind of calamity like tornadoes or fire or flooding or something like that. So maybe that's worth revisiting. Hillary Cassel, we had so many talks about property insurance on this program with you and others. And I know there is a bill on the books, on the table right now, to sort of hold insurers accountable for lowering rates after the last 2 in the last year bills that went through to help them survive as businesses. Where is that in the process?
So it's still working its way through its committee. I don't serve on any committees that will hear that bill. The first time I will likely hear that bill will be if it makes it to the House floor. I have had an opportunity to review it, but this is something that I've been advocating for in the legislature prior to even being elected. I've been advocating as a consumer advocate for the last 5 years that insurance accountability is really one of the bigger problems. It's very obvious that the reforms that have been passed over the last several years aren't actually the reforms that are necessary to bring people's premiums down. And we need to fix that. We're preventing access to the courts. We're making it harder for consumers to actually hold their insurance companies accountable, yet without any relief in sight. Actually, several insurance companies have asked for rate increases as high as 60%. And condominiums are asking for increases of over 100%. So it's quite evident to me that the Republican-controlled legislature doesn't understand this issue and don't have their arms wrapped around it. And as a result, everyday consumers are still going to suffer and continue to pay the highest premiums in the country.
It's going to be a very tough year for a lot of people. I would love to get into some of the bills that actually one that the governor signed this week. We have a quick break and we will be back with Chip LaMarca and Hillary Cassel in a couple of minutes. Stay tuned. State Representatives Chip LaMarca and Hillary Cassel from R&D, respectfully, both from Broward's coastal cities. I want to turn now to some of the big bills of the week. And, there's so much, I know, that goes on in session that is so bipartisan and so important for the state. And this session, some of those culture clash bills have really been sucking up all the oxygen in the room. This week, the governor actually signed the bill that makes pregnancy terminations a bit more restrictive to 6 weeks. And there was hours of debate before the preceding floor vote this week. You both voted no. All the Democrats voted no, but there were some very interesting votes from the Republicans, especially in South Florida. Chip LaMarca, you were one of those who crossed party lines. Take us through the thought process and your voting against that bill.
Well, thanks, Glenna. I would say, in your description of pregnancy termination, I think that's putting it lightly. I mean, listen, we dealt with abortion last year, and we dealt with a 15-week ban, and I had this is a struggle for me. I'm Catholic. I have an uncle who's a Catholic priest. I spoke with him about it. I spoke with my wife about it. 15 weeks for me was where I thought we would create more pro-life situation for people in the state of Florida. It would allow people to have that procedure, but it would also be safe and legal, but exceptionally rare. And for me, that was where I wanted to be. I think that's where my district constituents are. And ultimately, 6 weeks was just, it wasn't a number I could get to. I very, very much respect life, and I'm pro-life. And, I had this conversation of, we're at this point now where we're basically talking about a number. And for me, is something in a practical world possible in 6 weeks? I just didn't see where that was, so that's why I was a no on the issue.
And you say things that we've heard very similarly from other South Florida Republicans. Vicky Lopez, rep for Miami, also cast an opposing vote. In the Senate, Alexis Calatayud from Miami cast an opposing vote. There were a couple of South Florida lawmakers that did not vote at all. Fabian Basabe from Miami Beach, Jim Mooney from the Keys, Dottie Joseph, who's a Democrat from North Miami. Hillary Cassel, this bill, all we talk about really when we report on it is the abortion restrictions. But I should say law, because the governor signed it now. But there is millions in that bill for pregnancy support, for maternal support, newborn support. Did anything about those kind of components in the bill really make you step back and think about your vote?
Thank you for that question. I do just want to highlight for people that are listening, while the governor has signed the bill into law, abortion access and healthcare is still available in the state of Florida. The law actually does not go into effect until additional factors come into play, which primarily is going to be the decision of the Florida Supreme Court in Planned Parenthood versus state of Florida. So I want to be very clear to those constituents and residents of Florida that are listening. It's still available. It's still accessible. While it's been signed into law, it is not in effect yet.
Yes, and thank you very much for pointing that out. I appreciate that.
But going back to your question, you know, the reality is it's very smoke and mirrors what that $25 million covers. That $25 million is going to very specific what are being referred to as, you know, pregnancy crisis centers, but they're all smoke and mirrors. They are people espousing religious beliefs. Many of them aren't actual medical providers. They are there to discourage women from seeking that access and making it more complicated. So all we've done, and Representative LaMarca mentioned it, and when he talked about his faith, is we continuously in the state turn our head away from the First Amendment, which is freedom of religion. You know, and I also want to comment on the fact that Representative LaMarca did vote on the 15-week ban. And maybe if more Republicans stood up last year and voted no and stood up to the governor, we wouldn't be in a position where we're even considering a 6-week ban. But here we are because the Republican Party rubber stamped the 15-week ban, and now we're back. So the $25 million is smoke and mirrors for pregnancy crisis centers to keep people from accessing safe and legal abortions based on a violation, in my opinion.
I would like to hear you respond to that, Rep. LaMarca.
Yeah, Hillary is a friend, but I couldn't disagree more. The First Amendment is freedom of religion. It's not freedom from religion. People who have a faith in life and a belief in life, if they go to a pregnancy help center, ultimately that care, those millions of dollars, that $25 million is to help put somebody in a situation where they can afford to figure out how to deal with their job and their timing and resources to be able to have that child. I don't think I think smoke, we're talking about life. I don't think smoke and mirrors is something I would insert in this conversation. And as far as, you know, my vote last year, like I said, I believe in life, but I think 6 weeks is, to me, it's a trap. And I want to go back to one of the things you said before about the members who did not vote. I want to be very careful about this because Representative Mooney was dealing with a family crisis, an accident in his family, and he was not there. But anyone who took a walk in that vote, I have a real problem with that because this is one of those things you can't hide, you can't walk away from. You're either a yes or you're a no because your constituents deserve better. Hillary was where she was, you know, on it, and I was where I was on it for different reasons. But at least the constituents that we have know, and so someone to have taken a walk on that vote to me it's not good.
I just want to mention to your point that I ascribe no judgment to who did not vote, and I know Representative Mooney had family issues. I believe Representative Dottie Joseph also had a family issue as well. Fabian Basabe, I don't know why he didn't vote, but he did not. Hillary Cassel, what that representative said during the week, kind of pointed his finger at Democrats for not compromising on what he felt would be a 12-week limit. Your response to that?
My response to that is show up and do your job. You know, if he really thought that that was an option, there's an amendment process, and he could have put Democrats on the board to actually support his accusations. And the reality of the situation is Democrats, with the language presented in the 15-week bill, weren't willing to compromise. We believe in the precedent set by Roe v. Wade. That is what we are fighting for. We had legal precedent for 50 years that has been in place, and that's the standard that we believe Floridians in the nation is comfortable with. So he should have showed up to work. He could have filed an amendment. He could have put us on the board and actually supported his accusations. But he didn't show up to work that day.
We want to talk about the bill that redoes the standards for death penalty, and we will do that and talk about your votes on that when we come right back. Representatives Chip LaMarca and Hillary Cassel, both of Broward County, talking about the big bills this week. One in the House that passed the House was to redo the standards for Florida's death penalty. No longer will it need to be a unanimous by the jury if the governor signs this. Instead, 8 out of 12 jurors, a direct outgrowth of what happened in the sentencing phase for the Marjory Stoneman Douglas High shooter. You both voted yes on this bill. Hillary Cassel, let's start with you. Just take us through that vote.
Sure. You know, it was somewhat of a difficult decision for me. I've struggled with my views on the death penalty, but I'm a former assistant state attorney here in Broward County. So when we talk about beyond a reasonable doubt, I understand what that means in practical application. And where we have inequalities in our justice system start well before we get to that place of a 12-0 guilty unanimous verdict, which this death penalty bill still requires. And it still requires beyond a reasonable doubt, and it still requires a 12-0 vote on aggravating factors. Where most people's issues, and my issues, frankly, with our justice system and where those cracks lie is the guardrails that are in place when we arrest and making sure that we have the right person at the table. And that comes into play in making sure that also people have access to good lawyers, making sure our state attorneys and our public defenders are well funded so they can keep good talent to make sure that people are getting the best advocates on both sides and have the experience necessary to make sure they're actually prosecuting the right person. So when we get down to an 8-4 verdict decision in death penalty, really what we're talking about is making sure everything that we do leading up to that is done, whether it's training our police, making sure biases are uncovered during training, making sure they have psychological care during it. But for me, at the end of the day, in addition to what happened at Marjory Stoneman Douglas, you know, we need to have justice at the very end result. And I do think our community and those families were robbed of that justice in this particular situation. And at the end of the day, that's why I voted yes for all those reasons.
Chip LaMarca, take us through your vote.
Again, a real look inward as a representative of this district and someone who's been involved in the political process for a long time. But again, as a Catholic, I look at where the church is going, and I have to make my decisions based on where I think what Hillary said was really important with respect to the process getting there. But if ever there was a case where you have absolute proof and you have everything, all of the facts aligning, and you understand what the punishment should and could be for this situation at Marjory Stoneman Douglas. I mean, I've had the opportunity, it's unfortunate why I had the opportunity, but to speak with and work with parents like Tony Montalto and Ryan Petty and school members Hickson and Aladef. And, when you have people on the left and the right and in the middle, all kind of saying the same thing and looking at the process and the system where it ended up, and then you have, again, at the end of this process, when we took our votes, you have representatives like Cassel and Daly and other people who were, conflicted on it as I was, as far as what the death penalty means, but what this means. That's how I got there. And I mean, I think if you're going to have a death penalty, this was the case to have it. And if you're just going to, find ways to get around it, then just eliminate it altogether. But ultimately, I think it should be in extreme cases. And this was absolutely an extreme case where there's a lot of terrible loss and lack of closure for these families. And I don't want to see that ever happen again in the state of Florida.
In the short time we have left together, I want you both to listen to something that one of your colleagues said in committee this week as that committee took up one of the bills that would really change things for transgender community as far as state paid health care and a lot of other rules and regulations that they feel targeted by. This is State Rep Webster Barnaby from Deltona. Take a listen.
The Lord rebuke you, Satan, and all of your demons and all of your imps who come and parade before us. That's right, I called you demons and imps who come and parade before us and pretend that you are part of this world.
Chip LaMarca, I know this is, I apologize for asking this question to colleagues, but I think on behalf of your constituents, it's important to hear, you know, your reaction to that.
I was in the committee. I was more than put off. I was appalled. It seemed to go on forever. I kind of sat and I said, all right, when is it going to stop? I don't always agree with a lot of the activist organizations that surround our LGBTQ community. I have many friends and many constituents I respect in it to a great deal and work with on a lot of issues from the LGBT community. And I would just say that it was totally out of line. It was unacceptable. It shouldn't have happened in committee. I don't know that anyone thought it was good. You know, anybody could have predicted that. And I do believe that, you know, it was uncalled for, and that's not how I feel. That's not how the vast majority of any Republicans I've ever met in Tallahassee or worked with. I mean, people may have strong conservative views and may differ with some of these issues, but that's not a place for this. I mean, we go to Tallahassee to work together, and we're expected to work together on like the next bill that comes up. As Hillary said, I mean, we went from abortion to kid care, which is a tremendous priority of mine, and we got some great work done on that. You can't do that if you burn bridges. And for me, that wasn't just burning a bridge; that was, you know, blowing it up.
Hillary Cassel, I will say that the representative did eventually apologize for that. You're not on that committee, are you? You weren't there.
I was not.
But you heard about it or saw it because it dominated the headlines for a day. Yes.
And it should continue to dominate the headlines. That will never be easy to listen to. I am absolutely disgusted that the chair of that committee allowed that to continue to be discussed. These are members of the public. These are our constituents. This is the people's capital. This is where they come to tell us what they want us to do with their state, and to be treated that way, and to utilize religion. And again, I think this is very important to talk about. We are elected officials. There is a separation of church and state for a reason. And if you're pressing a vote button based on your religion, I said it in my debate on abortion, you're in the wrong job. You are here to help people and not place additional unnecessary burdens in their way because you don't agree. The fact that the speaker has done absolutely nothing to admonish this behavior, the fact that the chair did nothing to stop him in committee, goes to show you that they support what he said. If they didn't, he would be removed of his committees, and we would have seen more discipline and reaction from the speaker's office, and we haven't. So as far as I'm concerned, they're supporting his behavior. An apology after the fact, what does that mean if there's actual no consequences for the words that he said? It's unacceptable.
We are 3 weeks to go. I hope you both will keep in touch with us on other big things coming in for a landing. Chip LaMarca, Hillary Cassel, both state reps from Broward County. So great to have you aboard. Appreciate it.
Great to be here.
Thank you.